Welcome back to Bible study for this week. I will admit every once in a while I like to read a little bit from the competition. There's this one group that calls themselves a Christian group. I like reading their literature. They're famous for their literature. And I like it just because I like to laugh sometimes. And it makes for hilarious reading. There was one story I read a couple of years ago that saddened me quite a bit. There was a man who they honored. He had just died. He was approaching 90 years old, and he had pretty much spent his entire life with that publishing company for the group that does this. And you think about this. He spent his entire life being self-sacrificial, but to the wrong cause. Now, one thing about this group, which many of y'all might have figured out who it is by now, but a characteristic also held by some actual Christian groups is we forget the difference about being united in the right way. We put a lot of emphasis on saying Christians should act this way, Christians should act that way. Some groups say you must witness this way. They have their organized evangelism. There's nothing wrong with organized evangelism in itself, but the problem is when you try to make everyone the same way. Reason why I'm shooting in the kitchen this week, got to have access to cookie cutters. We have nice little interesting cookie cutters here. The thing is, when you put it into dough, you end up making the same shape over and over again. And this is something that we commonly call, when we apply it to the spiritual terms, cookie cutter Christians. We try to make everyone the same way. But that's just not the case. I want you to think about this. There is a difference between unity, which we have been talking about for the last several weeks, and uniformity. Uniformity happens sort of like when you get a uniform shape, when you apply pressure from the outside. Unity happens when it comes from the inside. And I want you to think about some of these differences between how we need to be united and not just uniform in the way that we act. I want you to think about this, because this might be the first time you're thinking about this. Which best describes you? Are you one of those who's a product of uniformity, or are you being a product of unity? And if you're not being a product of unity, what do you need to change to make that happen? Second of all, if you started reading this section of verse, we're talking in Philippians chapter 2. We're just going to go through verse 8 probably this week. Officially we're going through 11, but I've only got questions through verse 8 right for this week. Christ had everything. In verse 6, yet he gave it all up. He said nothing was of himself. Now, I want you to think about this. What does unselfish concern, which is Christ demonstrated, look like? And what is the price of that unselfish concern? For Christ, he was willing to put his life on the line. What is the price for us? As you keep on reading, you also discover about humility. Now, humility is one of these wonderful things. We have some people who live it out in the public eye. I think of Mother Teresa as a wonderful example of humility. She just laid herself completely out to take care of others. But here's the thing. Mother Teresa was a rare example because she was a public figure who was able to demonstrate humility. But if true humility doesn't seek attention, how can people who are in the public eye be humble? And if we are seeking in some ways to get attention for ourselves, how do we demonstrate the same humility that Christ spoke about? We are to die to self every day. That's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 31. You can read the entire verse right below. But once again here, think about examples of people who are humble and how they've managed to stay humble even though it would be a chance to be in the public eye. Next thing I want you to think about, Christ was able to do the dirty work of service. He got down to the nitty-gritty. He did what needed to be done. Now think about ways that people that you've seen in your life who have been willing to get down and dirty to do the nitty-gritty work of service. And think about what makes them that way. Part of it is you will spot that they're willing to pay the price. People who are there are tons and tons of people out there who are willing to serve if there is no cost to themselves. They're willing to go out and just maybe go out to just do the little things here and there, and just things sometimes at practically no cost or no cost. And when there is a price involved on serving, that is when people tend to back out. Now, I want you to think about this. Jesus was willing to die. Once again, this keeps on coming through. In the name of service. He did the ultimate dirty work of service. And it had a definite price. I don't care what you say, death is going to come across as a cost every time. Now I want you to think, all acts of service. Do all acts of service have a cost? On top of that, I want you to think about some examples that have a low cost and examples that have a high cost to you. And I want you to think about this. In the examples that you've seen where people have put themselves on the line, where they have been willing to pay a price to serve, is there a correlation between the cost of service and the benefits that are received? These are the things I want you to think about, and I'll see you on Saturday night.